What is the inverse of a function? How can you find the inverse of a linear function? This is section 4.7. I love inverses. I think you guys will find them pretty fun and pretty easy. There's a lot that you can do with them in time too. So if we say that f of x equals 2x plus 1, this is how you can think through how to get the inverse. Just consider if you plugged a number in here, what would be the first thing you do? Order of operations says that you would multiply it by 2, correct? So right here, multiply by 2. And then after you get that answer, you would add 1. To find the inverse, what you do is you go in the opposite order and the inverse operation. So instead of add 1, you would subtract 1. And then rather than multiply by 2, you would divide by 2. And your new function, we usually label these as an inverse by that. I don't see where your book or where the material for Algebra 1's telling you that, but I'll just give you a heads up for Algebra 2. Put a little negative up there to show inverse. And now we would say x minus 1 divided by 2 is the inverse of that function. So that's one way you can get it. Just go through order of operations. What you would be doing is you plug in, and then go the inverse of that and the inverse operation as well. Okay, now here's the cool thing about these. We just found out that these are inverses. Watch what happens. If I plug in negative 2, negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, plus 1 is negative 3. 0 times 2 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Okay? Now, if we happen to list what our outcome was here, and we plug these in, negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4, divided by 2 is negative 2. 1 minus 1 is 0, divided by 2 is 0. 5 minus 1 is 4, minus 2 is 2. So isn't it interesting that when we went inverse order of operations and inverse operations, we ended up with our x, y, switching around. It's just as if we took the y and flipped it to the x and the x to the y. Okay? Let's look just curiosity-wise what the slope is. Here, this is a plus 4. This is a plus 2. I don't know if there's any correlation here, but it seems like there would be. This is plus 4. This is plus 2. So the slope for this one is 4 over 2, which reduces to 2. We can see that right there. The slope for this one is 2 over 4, which we can see right here. Okay, this could be rewritten as 1/2 x minus 1/2. So you can kind of see that we have an inverse of the slopes as well. That might help you when you're doing these, to just know that. So find the inverse. Now we have another method we can do, since we discovered that our x and y seem to flip around. Rather than sit here and say, well, I'm going to multiply by 1/2, subtract 1, and then go inverse of that, we could do it this way. Draw our line. Whoa, I'm sorry. That one is all done. Draw our line, circle our creepy dude, go up our PIMNAs, we add 1 to each side. We have y plus 1 equals 1/2 x. Divide by 1/2. Now, think about this. If we're dividing by 1/2, half x divided by 1/2, remember how you do division of fractions? You skip, flip, and multiply. So we're really saying that we're multiplying by 2. Okay? So we can write it as divide by 1/2, or we can write it as multiply by 2. You want to do the same thing to both sides, so we end up with 2y plus 2 equals x. Now, because we know that inverses from our t-charts just a minute ago, how our x and our y switched around, since we know that, we can swap the x and y places now. 2x plus 2 equals y. This is the inverse of this. So that is another way to find the inverse. Now, here's where it might come in handy. Let's say you're going to the water park, and it's $30 to get in, and it's $2 a ride. So first off, you figure out, okay, I want to take this many rides. So you go 2 times your R plus 30 for your entry. Okay? Say I want to take 10 rides, I need to have $50 to go. But then one day, you get there and you go, okay, this is how much money I have, how many rides can I do? Well, if this function was your total money per ride, if you find the inverse, you'll be looking at how to calculate how many rides you can do. Okay, so let's circle this creepy dude. Subtract 30 from each side, so A R minus 30 equals 2R. Now we divide each side by 2, and we have our number of rides. Now this has become our dependent variable, our number of rides. So we want to switch this to just being our total amount of money. So if we subtract 30 from our total amount of money, divide the answer by 2, we'll know the number of rides that we can take. That's why it's useful, is you can look in your pocket and say, oh, okay, here's how I do it. And quite honestly, I think all of you have done inverses when you end up in those situations. Okay, we'll catch you in class.